You're listening to Parasearch Radio with paranormal news, views and reviews from across the UK and beyond. Find us on Facebook, Twitter and the World Wide Web at Parasearch Radio. The views and opinions expressed by presenters and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Parasearch UK Radio or its affiliates and sponsors. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to the KTPF Reload Show. In case you're wondering what the Reload Show is about, if you haven't heard previous shows, these are the interviews that were conducted by good friends of mine, Steve and Sue Taggart, in the days of the KTPF radio show. Their own radio show ran for just over 4 years, broadcasting every week for over 3 hours. I joined them in the last 18 months of the show's run, but eventually the guys felt they'd just about had enough. It was a monumental effort to keep broadcasting every week for 3 hours. It was a wonderful show. But unfortunately they're no longer involved, and the shows have just sort of sat in the archives, so I thought it would be nice to bring them back to life and bring you the interviews that the guys conducted over those 4 years. They include some of the most interesting people within the world of the paranormal and some not so well known but still, nevertheless still very interesting. We even have 1 or 2 rather unusual shows, including a live seance and other things along those lines. Anyway, hopefully you enjoyed tonight's show, and this is the KTPF Reload Show. Enjoy.
This program deals with themes of an adult nature and is intended for a mature audience. They've landed.
You're in the right place. Online, on the web, and on air. All over the world.
Talk Radio.
You hear us, we hear you.
Yeah, good evening everybody, and welcome to another episode of the KTPF Community Talk Show. My name is Suzanne.
Well, I will be if I turn my mic on. I'm Steve.
This is a show that one regular describes it as like sitting down with a coffee with a group of friends. So I hope you feel that way this evening. Grab yourself a cup. For those who don't know, Steve and I started the KTPF, which stands for Keeping the Paranormal Friendly, back in 2007. With our mission to try and bring the paranormal world together, share our findings and help move us all forward, encouraging you to share information, advice and most importantly, friendship. Remember, collaboration, not competition. And although we concentrate more on the investigating side of the paranormal, this show incorporates a wide spectrum within this fascinating subject, from cryptozoology to UFOs. What's coming up on the show? Well, tonight we've got, I'm really scared to be honest with you, because I'm hoping that the live stream, the internet, the Skype is going to be really good to me tonight, because we're talking about spontaneous human combustion, or SHC for short, which is a phenomena in which the human body will burst into an all-consuming flame without any apparent source or ignition. The first recorded case occurred in 1663 when a Danish anatomist reported that a French woman had been consumed by flames while she slept, leaving her straw bed untouched. Hundreds of reported cases followed a similar pattern. The victims are almost always alone, and coroners have always noted a sickly sweet smell in the room where the incident occurred. Interestingly, while the torso and head are usually burnt to ashes, the extremities and surrounding objects such as newspapers and clothing are typically untouched. These unusual circumstances have led to SHC receiving a lot of attention from those interested in the paranormal. But does it really exist? Though the term spontaneous human combustion is fairly recent, the phenomena has been described in many popular books on mysteries and the unexplained. In fact, there is nearly a dozen references to the people bursting into flames in pre-1900 fiction. Did you know that, Steve?
I didn't know.
The most famous example is Charles Dickens' 1853 novel Bleak House, in which a character burns to death without any apparent reason. In modern times, SHC has appeared in movies and on television shows, including The X-Files, and it's even sort of the superpower of Johnny Storm, the Human Torch in Marvel Comics' Fantastic Four. Breathe. In 1982, SHC was offered as a cause of death at the inquest in the death of Jean Saffin, 62. Relatives say they saw her burst into flames in her North London home, but coroner Dr. John Burton said there was no such thing as SHC and recorded an open verdict. In Galway Island, 76-year-old Michael Faherty was found burned to death in his home in December 2010. The coroner concluded Faherty's death was a cause of spontaneous human combustion, a human being catching fire with no apparent cause. So can human bodies simply burst into flames without any external source of ignition? Or could there be a more mundane and scientific explanation for the phenomena? Our guests tonight are Mark Rosney. Hopefully John Hall's with him. And later we will be speaking to Larry Arnold, author of the book Ablaze, where Larry details cases of spontaneous human combustion using eyewitness accounts. Larry, you've been researching spontaneous human combustion for quite some years now, haven't you?
We have been. Our interest began when we were in junior high school, which would put us back in the early to mid 60s. We're not that old. In the early 60s, when we picked up a book by Frank Edwards called Stranger Than Science. Mm-hmm. And in that book, Frank wrote a chapter called The Cinder Woman. It's about an incredible cremation that happened to Mary Hardy Reeser back in 1951. And as we went through high school and then later into college, we talked to our teachers and our professors about this subject now and then, and not one of them could give us any additional information about it. So after we left college, we decided to check in to see if Mr. Edwards had made up a story about the Cinder Woman or whether he had based it as a newspaper reporter on actual facts at the time. And we discovered that he did a straight news story reporting, and that Mary Reeser had indeed inflamed quite miraculously, quite mysteriously, and at the time quite inexplicably, in St. Petersburg, Florida, back in July of 1951.
Mm. So what is spontaneous human combustion, and what is the cause of it? Is that known?
Oh, wow, that's a double-barreled question. The first part is really easy. The latter part is a big challenge. Here's our definition of spontaneous human combustion. It is the ability of a person to smoke, blister, or otherwise burn in the absence of a known external ignition source, in the absence of high amperage electrical current, in the absence of caustic chemicals, in the absence of radioactive material. If you can rule out those external means as a source for the burns to the body, then we argue one has to consider the possibility of spontaneous human combustion.
Right, okay. And one thing I would like to ask is, she says after losing her page, then it seems to be a rare phenomena. Do you know how often it occurs?
We certainly concur with you in that spontaneous human combustion and its corollary preternatural combustibility are very rare phenomena. Thousands of people die every year in a fatal fire of a conventional known explanation. Spontaneous human combustion cases are incredibly rare. You stand, based on our research, a much higher chance of being struck by lightning, perhaps even multiple times by lightning, than you do experiencing spontaneous human combustion. Our case record goes back to the 1400s, based on the medical literature that we've researched. From that time to present, we've got about 500 cases now in our database. So divide that by the number of people who are alive in those several centuries, and the odds are incredibly small that you will experience spontaneous human combustion. That said, on occasion, as you well know, people occasionally hit the big lottery. And whatever causes spontaneous human combustion sometimes strikes down those unlucky souls.
Right, I'm going to pass over to Mark Rosney, who's also on Skype. Mark, is there anything you want to ask?
Well, not at this juncture. I think I agree with everything Larry's had to say there. It's a very rare phenomenon, but there is a phenomena there, and I think that's the important thing that we need to emphasise.
Right. Okay. We have a question in the chat room, Larry. Is SHC only occurring in humans, or are there any reports of animals combusting?
Wonderful question. Yeah. We do mention in our book Ablaze a few cases where animals appear to have spontaneously ignited as well as humans. So we're dealing here with a corollary phenomenon that we term spontaneous animal combustion, SAC, as opposed to SHC.
Right, okay. Now, you say, how far have you traced it back to?
Medically, in the medical literature, we have found a case involving a knight named Polonus that dates back to the latter part of the 1400s.
Wow.
If we look at mythology and legends and ancient history, as we do in some chapters in our book Ablaze, then we believe we can find parallels and very accurate descriptions to modern SHC-type fire deaths that date back several thousands of years. So in our view, this is a malady long hidden by medical science that has plagued mankind for millennia.
Right, we have another question in the chat room for you. Dave and Liz this time. All of the SHC cases, is there, out of all of the SHC cases, is there any kind of similarity with the person, i.e. skin, eye colour, hair colour, etc., or is it anybody could get it?
Your chat person asked something that we have pondered and tried to get a handle on for several decades. If we could find one set of common factors that were present in most, if not all, the cases of SHC-type fire deaths, it would be much easier to explain why this phenomenon occurs. We have not been able to do so. Clearly, the elderly segment of the population is more prone to experiencing SponCom based on the statistics and the studies that we have pulled together. That makes sense. The body tends to deteriorate as it ages. Having said that, the oldest case in our database is a 114-year-old holy man from India. At the other extreme, the youngest appears to be a 6-week-old toddler in a crib in the UK. And based on some information of a case coming out of India last summer, that age could drop to even younger.
And they follow on and ask that could it be related to anything, any other illnesses such as cancer?
We've not been able to make a correlation between spontaneous human combustion type deaths and cancer. On the other hand, that kind of information is not collected by fire investigators when they file their death certificates. So we really don't know whether there's a correlation there or not. Simply, we just do not have the evidence to state that there could be one.
Right, okay. In the UK, back in the 90s, scientists believed they had found the secret behind stories of people suddenly bursting into flames. Using a dead pig wrapped in cloth, they were convinced that the wick effect was responsible. What does your research say about that theory?
Yes, the wick effect. Yes, the debunkers, the naysayers of SponCom have convinced themselves that the wick effect, in which a human body is ignited externally and then burns up in its own body fat slowly over many hours, in essence becoming its own human an inverted candle burning up in its clothing and body fat, is the explanation to explain away all these alleged mysterious episodes that history and medicine has labeled spontaneous human combustion. When we began our research, we weren't stupid. We thought, does this make sense? We did our own experiments. We could not get the experiments to ash in our burn sample. The BBC and other programs have conducted these experiments repeatedly on camera. The earliest that we know of was done by a Dr. McDougall of Drysdale back in the late 80s, in which he took a sliver of fat, wrapped it in cheesecloth, and held it over a Bunsen burner. Of course, not surprisingly, the fat charred, and he claimed that this was evidence to explain away so-called alleged spontaneous human combustion instances. Given the fact that he did not include bone, in our view, made the experiment completely pointless. Since then, some other naysayers, John DeHaan, particularly in this country of America, has burned up several pig carcasses to once again prove that the wick effect can explain away spontaneous human combustion allegations. The first experiment that John did that we know about, he used an accelerant, a liter of gasoline, to fuel the heat of combustion necessary to cause the fat to slowly render out and sustain combustion over several hours. Given that the cases that we have documented do not contain an accelerant, that experiment lacks merit in our view. Subsequent experiments that he has conducted led to not only the pig burning up, but actually creating enough heat and in the burn chamber to result in near or actual flashover fires, requiring the usage of fire suppression equipment to extinguish the blaze so the entire burn chamber or warehouse did not burn to the ground. Contrast that with classic spontaneous human combustion fire scenes in which the human body is ashened almost completely to powder, leaving perhaps part of an extremity, a lower leg, or a lower arm left behind to indicate that the pile of ash really once did belong to a human body. And yet there is no significant heat nor flame damage to surrounding combustible materials such as linens, stacks of newspaper, or paint on a ceiling only a few feet above the point of combustion that consumed the body.
Right, thank you for that. Talking about the temperatures, I've heard about the extreme temperatures, that it's hotter than mortuaries uses in the cremation process. Are there theories as to what can cause such intense heat? Somebody's asked whether maybe it's due to tumours exploding internally.
Well, that's a theory we haven't considered, and we've got about 120 in our book ablaze that we posit might explain various cases of spontaneous human combustion fire scenes. Tumors per se, we've not considered that. Don't know how that would work, but if your listener wants to share more information, we'd be glad to tell you later how he or she can contact us. We're always eager to learn more information because we do not claim to be omniscient about this subject, nor many others. We have looked at biochemistry. We have considered bioelectricity, aberrations electrically at the cellular level that could cause a tremendous amount of heat or electrical energy to suddenly release within the human body. Anything that affects the hypothalamus, which is the body's thermostat, causing it to go into high temperature overdrive, lends itself to consideration to explain these cases of intense localized heat, and yet a heat that fails to as we indicated earlier, damage or ignite or achieve the ignition combustion points of surrounding combustibles that are much more easily burned than is a human body.
Right. And concerning the heat and that, we had a guest on the other day, or the other week, who had a bit of a skin complexion, a bit dermatological, or if that's the right word. And he was saying that we were saying that you were coming on, and we said like that. He was saying that he's got lesions on his hands and that, and they burn and they look like burns. Could it be something similar to that, maybe?
It certainly could be, based on the research that we've conducted and with people that we've spoken to previously who have described to us similar conditions. We certainly can't diagnose his particular burns based on what you've told us, but if he'd like to contact us, we'd be happy to explore his condition further in detail off air with him.
Right, okay. Dave and Liz said all they're thinking of is that everyone is born with cancer gene. It is a mutation of something igniting, such as smoking, that creates what we consider to be cancer. It's Dave that I was talking about. He has arthritic paralysis or something. So that was the condition I was thinking of. I didn't realise it was you, Dave, sorry. But, so basically he said, could it be a gene of some type?
Again, it might be. The challenge, one of the many challenges with documenting and researching this subject, strange as it is, macabre as it is that experts already in the field who should be eager and curious to understand how this happens tend to discount it, tend to dismiss it, and tend to want to not talk about it, period. In essence, spontaneous human combustion is really xenophobic. So the kind of information that we would love to have access to just isn't made available because it's not collected in the first place. Whenever we forget going down to Philadelphia here in Pennsylvania in the U.S., which had a number of cases that fit the concept of spontaneous human combustion. We showed up at the fire headquarters in Philly and asked to see the files on specific individuals. We had names, we had dates, we had approximate locations. And the chief fire investigator on duty that day told us that he couldn't help us, not because the files had been moved, not because the files had been destroyed over time, but simply because the things that we were asking about, the types of fires that we were inquiring of, do not happen. So what we did was lay on his table some photographs that we have published in our book Ablaze, and in fact a set of photographs that had just been handed to us a few hours earlier from a fire photographer / fire marshal in a nearby neighboring jurisdiction that fit the classic fire scene of spontaneous human combustion. And we said to this Philadelphia fire inspector, "You're the expert. Here are the photographs. The photographs are not hoaxes. They depict real fire scenes. Now, with your expertise, you tell us how to explain these fire scenes." And he got very, very quiet, very uncomfortable, and finally his response to us was this: "We shall never forget these words, quote, I'd go out, I'd get drunk, and I'd forget about it," end quote. So unfortunately, with an attitude like that within the mainstream fire service community, and we find this quite often, we as a researcher outside the fire service community will never be able to acquire the kinds of information that would help us and help your listeners in the chat room come to a better understanding of how these deaths can be best explained and perhaps prevented.
Yeah. Steve, you wanted to ask the question?
Yeah, hi Larry. Can you hear me okay?
You're coming in loud and clear. Thank you, sir.
Okay, before you came on, I came up with a theory that instead of us actually burning, it's like a mini explosion inside that is there and then gone in seconds. And someone on the chat room said it's a bit like magnesium, where you get a quick flash and burn at high temperatures and then gone. Is there anything in the body that could cause that? I know we don't have that much magnesium naturally, though.
Right. Your observation first that this could be so quick that it would be more like an explosion than a simple combustion. Of course, combustion is nothing more than an explosion is nothing more than a very rapid combustion. In our view, has a lot of merit. In our book, we devote one chapter to the case of Helen Conway that happened here again in Pennsylvania back in 1964, in which, having talked to several firefighters who were involved at the fire scene, the command officers for the fire department that responded, and based on their investigations at the time, we've narrowed the time frame for the burning of Mrs. Conway down to 6 minutes, which is just absolutely outrageous given the extent of destruction to Helen Conway's body. Could there be a chemical like magnesium or diphosphane or an aberrant reaction to B12, niacin in the body that would cause the hypothalamus to kick into, high temperature overdrive? It's theories that we're looking at, nothing that we can take yet into a laboratory and quantitatively replicate scientifically.
Okay. Now, there's talk that this is regional. It's not all over the world. Is that true?
Depends how you choose to define regional. We have found the phenomena worldwide on every continent save Antarctica, and not surprisingly not there because not many people are living down there.
Right.
But having said that, there are clusters or areas where this phenomena appears to be more likely to happen. As the United Kingdom, based on our research, has more cases per capita of this phenomenon than any other area of the world, and because the geographic area of the UK is relatively small and at relatively high latitude, what we did was plot the locations of cases of apparent, spontaneous, and preternatural human combustibility, as well as other unusual, odd, unexplained, spontaneous fires, such as to buildings and structures, on a map of the UK and look for patterns. What we discovered back in 1975 is what we now call the cartography of combustion, in which about 83% of the cases of anomalous fires in the United Kingdom could be connected by straight alignments, sometimes connecting 6, 7, perhaps as many as a dozen strange fires. Some of these fire lanes or fire trackways span several hundred miles of the UK terrain. suggesting to us, and perhaps it should suggest to insurers as well, that there are areas, at least in the United Kingdom, that are more inflammable, more incendiarily hazardous to one's health than other areas of the countryside.
Right, I see. Dave has come back and said about going back to the health issue. He said if you have a look at WPW Wolff Parkinson White syndrome, he said he has an extra bits on his heart, so that if the electrical current of my heart jumps into the extra parts, I'm dead. I can't be resuscitated. So, could it be something to do with the electrical currents in the body?
We suspect very strongly that bioelectricity plays a key role in providing a very reasonable, rational explanation to many of the cases that fit the concept of spontaneous human combustion. That's one way to get away from, where did the heat go? When we show these cases to fire officials, their first question invariably is, where did the heat go? Why isn't the ceiling scorched? Why aren't surrounding combustibles ignited as well as the body? If this is indeed not an oxidizing type of combustion, but more like an electrical phenomenon, an electrical fire, then there are reasons not to suspect high heat surrounding the individual who's consumed, but it can also better explain, we submit, why this fire appears to be so localized and internalized within the victim.
Yeah, that was my next question. How is it possible that some of the surrounding environment isn't is largely unscathed? Is it a theory you've not worked out yet?
Well, again, it's either a process that does not produce a tremendous amount of thermal heat energy, or it's a process that is so incredibly rapid that if indeed there is high heat external to the body, it is so short-lived that there is not ample time for the ignition points of surrounding combustibles to be reached.
Now, I'm a layman, or lay lady, whatever you want to call me. So basically, thinking about it, if sometimes, you can get so much static within your body, and with the methane gas, I've had static for days, but if that built up, and with the methane gas, could that possibly assist it?
It's theoretically possible. The spark would be some aberrant electrical process that would occur in your body. Mm-hmm. If it's built up a static charge either inside the body or in your clothing, that might lead to spontaneous or preternatural human combustibility. We know that Professor Brian Ford in your country, in Cambridge, about a year ago posited the presence of acetone in the body as the mechanism to explain spontaneous human combustion. We applaud Dr. Ford for a very imaginative and creative postulation. However, when we spoke to him, we questioned whether his soaking of his burn tissues in acetone, which everybody acknowledges is highly flammable, it's akin to soaking your clothing and your body in gasoline, really. Whether a living person could generate basically 100% concentration of acetone in the body, we argue not. Professor Ford said that he would have to experiment with that because at that point he had done only, basically supersaturated experiments using acetone. And our understanding is that since then, when the level of acetone is lower than 40%, it will not sustain combustion. We've conducted the experiment ourselves using what we believe are realistic levels of acetone, not more than 7 to 8% of body mass, and we simply cannot get self-sustaining combustion to occur using acetone.
Right, now Mark Rosney is on Skype. We were talking earlier. He's been connected with this type of case, haven't you, Mark? Would you like to tell Larry about it?
Yeah, sure. It's a case that happened in Widnes in Cheshire in 1985, in January 1985. And it was it's a catering student. She was just finished her class, and she was heading down the corridor of this college in Widnes, when all of a sudden she spontaneously caught fire. Now, when the coroner his study, etc. And they did what they call the
autopsy.
No, not the autopsy, but the inquiry. So a subsequent inquiry.
All right.
It was basically death. It was death by misadventure, but there's certain factors that involved that seem to be glossed over or ignored by the guy presiding over the whole proceedings. He basically said, put out your mind the spontaneous human combustion. It doesn't exist.
Right.
Yet the pathologist from the Home Office who came to do the investigation, he basically said, I'll try and find some information here if I can. But he basically said that he was at a loss to understand exactly what had happened here, mainly because she was wearing flame-proof overalls, and it seemed to be her jumper underneath the overalls that caught fire. And now, one of the things they said was that somebody she'd either basically touched a hot surface, and that basically caused the jumper to smolder. Or somebody actually set light to her, on the way down the corridor. But that couldn't have been the case because of the burns were only localized on her skin to parts of a jumper that actually caught fire. So in other words, it seems to be that the cause of the fire was not a flame to a periphery of the jumper, etc. It seemed to be it seemed to be from the body itself. I'm not making much sense here, I'm sorry, but just bear with a second. I'll just find some information here. Right.
So what do you think to that, Larry? I thought that people were asleep.
But while they're doing that, can I just say something here to let everybody everybody an idea of what we're talking about here?
Yeah.
Larry said that one body that it took 6 minutes to do. Yeah. Well, the temperature of the average crematorium is 870 to 980 centigrade.
Wow.
That's 1600 to 1800 Fahrenheit.
Mm-hmm.
And it can take up to 1 hour per 45 kilograms. That's 100 pound of body weight to actually cremate a body.
Wow.
And yet he's talking about something that happens in 6
minutes. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, as I say, I thought people were asleep or something when this happened. Larry, what do you think? But this woman was walking down the corridor by the sound of it.
Yeah, we think Mark is talking about the Fitzsimmons case.
That's the one, yes.
Yes. We have some familiarity with it, but if you would be so kind as to send us what you know about the case, you may have some information that we're unaware of that would help us understand more about it. Very intriguing case. Well, again, apologies. What was your question, Suzanne?
I'd always thought that people were maybe asleep when this was happening, but obviously not.
Yes. Oftentimes, spontaneous human combustion type fire deaths do occur when the victim is asleep. However, they can be standing, they can be sitting, they can be conversing, they can be walking down the street or a stairwell, as in the Fitzsimmons case. They can actually be in a boat in the middle of a lake when the body will go up in flame and or smoke.
Wow. It's such a fascinating subject. What made you decide to research this?
Well, innate curiosity, as we said when we learned about this when we were in junior high school, we subsequently found that nobody else in the Fortean field seemed to be doing much research into anomalous fires. Lots of people were tracking down UFOs. Lots of people were stomping the woods looking for Bigfoot and Sasquatch and things like that.
Yeah.
But this fire mystery just seemed to be kind of ignored. Mm. And so when we started to assess whether or not it should be ignored, or whether it was something really mysterious and worthy of further pursuit, in doing so, we concluded the latter. And it became what we thought was going to be a fairly short-lived study has become a 4 decades-long quest to document the phenomenon, to deal with professionals who should be better handling inquiries into this type of phenomenon, and then to obviously come to terms with understanding how it can happen, how it could happen, and if and how it could be prevented in the future from occurring to others.
Yeah. John, you're there. What do you think? What's your opinion on all this?
I'm just wondering if Larry's heard of the research of Livingstone Gearhart, who postulated that geomagnetic variations of the Earth's magnetic field that will possibly have a bearing on the cases.
Gerhardt did some applaudable work back in the 70s, and I guess maybe at least in the 70s. Yes, we do follow up on his initial pioneering work, and we do believe that that's geomagnetism or solar activity induced through the Earth's magnetosphere can be a contributing factor, in some cases, of spontaneous human combustion. It's our present sense that, at least for some of the cases in our database, as we said earlier, we can't find a single causative mechanism nor a single set of traits that link all the victims. So we postulate that many different factors probably come together at different times in different locations to produce what appears to be the same end result. And in some of those cases, it involves, as we said earlier, the cartography being in the right place but at the wrong time, perhaps overlaid with geomagnetic disturbances or geotelluric disturbances in that particular spot at that time, combined with aberrations in a particular person's biochemistry or bioelectrical body. All these things come together and then poof.
Yeah. John, you was mentioning something about poltergeist earlier. Did you?
Yeah, I just thought if Larry's had come across the poltergeist cases where there's fires localised and nothing else is touched, where that has a similar bearing to the spontaneous human combustion effect.
Yeah, the poltergeist fire phenomena. Are we still connected with you?
Yeah, we're still connected.
Well, we're breaking up here. The poltergeist fire phenomena category is another area of fire anomalies that is just blatantly ignored by mainstream fire science. But it does have bearing in some cases on near spontaneous human combustion and may indeed be associated with a very few actual spontaneous human combustion events.
Okay, does that answer your question, John?
Yeah, there's a case in Italy a few years back of a young a nanny, and she was accused of starting fires in the villa. She was looking after children and accused of being a witch. Have Larry heard of this?
Yes, we're aware of that case. There's another one in Italy, actually in Sicily, a couple of years back in Caneto, when an entire town had to be evacuated because things were bursting into flames spontaneously for no identifiable cause. The electric service was cut off to the town, and things continued to burst into flame. These cases, again, are like SHC and PC themselves, extremely rare. Extremely fascinating for someone in the 14 field like ourselves, and probably for yourselves as well. And we're puzzled by the fact that so often they're just ignored, covered up by the mainstream fire science community. We spoke earlier about you spoke, Mark, about problems with the Fitzsimmons case and how the coroner or the medical examiner just said, SHC doesn't happen. We have to discount that. We have death certificates from some of the victims, and we talk about in our book Ablaze. Dr. Bentley, for example, a classic case that really blew us away and really convinced us back in 1975 when we discovered the case. Really had something to go for it in this area that needed to be further investigated. Dr. Bentley's death certificate said that he died by asphyxiation and 90% burns to the body. Well, in order to determine medically that asphyxiation was the cause of death, you need a trachea. He had no trachea. Well, all he left behind was a kneecap and half of one leg lying next to the hole through which the rest of his body ashen to powder. The coroner the deputy coroner told us that in his view, Dr. Bentley's bodily destruction was 99%. And yet there was no heat or flame damage to the ceiling overhead. An enamel-painted bathtub directly above the edge of the hole through which his body burned was not even blistered. We were at that fire scene. We stand by every statement that we just made to your listeners at that fire scene. Another case from upstate New York in 1986, a retired firefighter, George Mott, burned through his bed, through the flooring below his bed, and into the crawl space below. and yet there was no damage to the ceiling again above his bed. The ceiling was so low that we, being 6 feet in height, could stand in his bedroom and touch his ceiling, and yet there was no heat or flame damage to it. There was so little left of George Mott's body that, save for his head and half of one leg, everything would be, including the head, save for half of one of his legs that was left on the mattress of his bed. Everything, according to the coroner, could be put in a shoebox. You just cannot put a normal-sized human head in a normal-sized shoebox. And yet, in his death certificate, his official cause of death was also attributed to asphyxiation. It's just ludicrous. It's just ludicrous.
I'm still amazed at the fact of what Steve found out, the fact that that these poor souls are actually being consumed within 6 minutes, when if you're being cremated, it takes an hour for the body to be disposed. At least an hour. It's just fascinating. It's just mind-boggling, to be honest with you. We've got another question in the chat room for you, Larry. Ghost Rider John would like to know: is it possible, of all the cases that have been spoken about, that there's maybe a chance of finding any part to identify the start of the fire?
How we wish we could answer yes to that. In most of the cases, and we have to say most because in this subject there seems to always be an exception to the rule, but in most of the cases, the point of combustion, the point of origin of the energy that consumes the body, appears to be in the solar plexus area, that is the lower abdominal region. Mm-hmm. And the energy that we presume begins there radiates outward rather uniformly in a fireball with a radius of about 1.5 feet. What is beyond the radius of that fireball oftentimes escapes incineration and burning to powder. So that's why we often find that these classic fire scenes of SHC, the lower leg, the forearm, perhaps a hand, or the upper head of the victim left intact, but everything else in between is obliterated. One of the naysayers of spontaneous human combustion, Mark Benecke, a forensic criminalist, has stated repeatedly in print and to us personally that SHC cannot happen because there's not one single case in which internal organs are burned more severely than our outer parts of the body. And his belief is that if that were not so, then we'd have evidence that the origin of the energy or the fire was internal. That statement simply does not support not believing in spontaneous human combustion, because with Dr. Bentley, with George Mott, with the case that happened here in the United States last year in Oklahoma, the victim there being Danny Van Zandt, internal organs are destroyed.
Yeah. So it's been, as you say, it's been going on for so many centuries. Has there ever been any scientifically studies or replications under proper observing conditions?
You're asking to put under scientific observation a phenomenon that is rare, obviously infrequent, the cause of which is not yet known. So trying to conduct an experiment under controlled conditions, just by definition, to us doesn't yet seem possible.
No.
Yeah, I'd like to echo with Larry on that one. Yeah, it's the same with most of the paranormal things we understudy. That they're spontaneous, and we need to get a handle on the conditions surrounding these things more thoroughly before we can actually start to go to the next stage and investigate further.
Absolutely.
I'm wondering whether it could have something to do with the atmosphere itself, or maybe that's a fragment of the ignition, if you understand what I mean. Something in the oxygen or something, and whatever's in the person, like static or some sort of thing, if you understand what I mean.
Well, fire needs oxygen to burn.
So I don't know whether that's the case, whether it be some sort of chemical reaction with something in the air.
May we be so bold as to submit and propose that there are energies and forces surrounding all of us that mainstream science doesn't yet recognize, let alone understand. There could be energies in the atmosphere. There are certainly energies at the subatomic level that are still being grappled with, and still we submit await discovery. The Large Hadron Collider has recently allegedly provided proof of Bose-Hagen, but we posited several decades ago that there is an even smaller particle that we dubbed the pyrotron that behaves very much like a neutrino, and as a result, it's so small that it can zip through the subatomic structure of your body and our body and everyone else's body on the planet unimpeded. But on rare occasion, we submit that this subatomic microparticle has an incredibly high energy level, and if it impacts with a quark in the human body, it sets off an instantaneous subatomic to atomic to molecular chain reaction, basically what we've dubbed the human Hiroshima effect, that can cause the body to incinerate instantaneously. We have been taken severely to task, that's an understatement, for making such an outrageous proposition, but it is based solidly on quantum mechanics, and all we need to do is know how much energy would have to be liberated, and consequently what size particle could do such a thing instantaneously. The answer to the first is about 34 million calories. That's a lot of energy. And the second answer is, when you crunch the formulas, you end up with a particle that is roughly 1.31 to 10 to the minus 31 centimeters in size. That's really small, and the Large Hadron Conductor is not capable of discovering something at that small a scale. Does it exist? We can't say that it does, but unless you want to throw out quantum mechanics, on which a lot of present-day scientific discoveries are being based, then you have to give consideration to what quantum mechanics has to say about spontaneous human combustion.
Right. Dave Liz has asked, would it be possible to contact the hospitals that do things like liposuction or removing stomachs or something like that, and use the parts that are normally destroyed to use for scientific research?
We don't know what the law says about doing such things in Britain, but that would be very difficult to do here in the United States. We'd have to get permission, obviously, from next of kin, first and foremost.
Right.
Going directly to the hospitals in our research has been problematic at best. We wrote to the Pontiac General Hospital in the early stages of our research because they dealt with an individual who was brought in for treatment under conditions that suggested strongly that he had his burns as a result of internal ignition, internal burning. Pontiac, he subsequently died in the hospital from his injuries. Pontiac General responded to our request for information by saying that they would be glad to cooperate if we could first provide them with documents requesting release of information from the patient. Well, they knew the patient was deceased, so we were unable to, meet their criteria for any kind of follow-up.
Right, well, the way you looked at it, they were going to destroy it anyway, so maybe. Mark, have you got any further with your notes there?
Yes, I have, but not on the Fitzsimmons case. I've moved on.
All right, would you like
sorry, it's just unfortunately I couldn't print anything out today, so I'm working off a few screens here. Now, one of the things you mentioned, Suzanne, was any studies that have tried to replicate this, and I think there's one that everybody in the UK would probably be very familiar with, and that was a study done for a documentary series called QED.
Yeah.
And that was done back in, I think it was 1989 or something like that, anyway, way back. And they tried to basically say that spontaneous human combustion was all done by the Wick effect.
Mm.
Now, I did some digging into this program. I spoke to a couple of the producers, some of the assistants, I should say not the producers, but the assistants on the show. And I basically said, look, there seems to be some sort of discrepancy here, in the actual footage itself. And they basically admitted to me that they'd used basically a pig wrapped up in a blanket, and used an accelerant on the pig to start it burning, a bit of alcohol thrown in.
Yeah.
And there was a couple of things wrong with the show. For one, halfway through the footage of this pig burning, you suddenly any fool could realise that they'd used a different pig halfway through, and they admitted to me that they had difficulty actually sustaining the blaze. For this thing, it just kept on going out. So the actual end effect on the show, which they basically conclusively proved that it was, the wick effect explains everything. It was a bit of a sham because they'd had to basically fudge the results themselves.
Why do you think, Larry, that they try and deter away from that as a result of the death?
And as we suggested earlier, the concept of spontaneous human combustion type fatalities is so distressing and disturbing and xenophobic to those in mainstream fire science and in mainstream medicine that frankly it's easier for them to either ignore the evidence or, as Mark suggests, and we'd really love for you to share more of that information with us, Mark, after the program, suggest that they are actually willing to misrepresent, and we're choosing that word very carefully, to misrepresent the evidence that they invoke to negate having to deal with spontaneous human combustion. The program that you described, and we know QED did a program back around 1988-89. The episode that you're referring to with the pig we think dates from 1999. That was an episode that we had involvement with. And the last thing we said to the field producer before we left our office here in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, to go to California to film John DeHaan doing the pig experiment was, if Mr. DeHaan can achieve what he claims he can do without using an accelerant, it will be historically significant. But don't let him do the experiment with any accelerant. And as you said to the listeners today, what you see in the footage is John DeHaan pours a liter of gasoline on the pig. Mm-hmm. But our cases don't involve accelerants. So why was he allowed to use an accelerant in the first place? And if, as you suggest, the producers allowed him to actually switch samples in mid-experiment, that's even more reprehensible. Mm-hmm. We have worked on programs here in the States where we know for a fact that the footage that finally broadcast on air to the viewing audience does not depict what actually happened in the combustion experiment. We know things have been misrepresented. We know officials have lied about the evidence. There is so much in our book that has been lied about, and we just don't understand why that is. We've been accused of mystery mongering. We're not here to monger a mystery. We think the facts of these incredible fire scenes beg a mystery that cries out for good, solid, honest research and investigation. Mm. Sadly, we do not get that from many in the fire service community. And as we said earlier, the only reason we can posit to you as to why that is that this phenomenon, this subject, evokes so much xenophobia, fear of the unknown, that they would much rather misrepresent the data and what history presents to all of us than to deal with the facts and come to a broader understanding of how the human body, on occasion, can do this to itself.
It is very scary, I must admit, to think that it could happen just like that, basically. It is very scary indeed. But there have been some survivors, haven't there?
Oh, yes, have there been survivors? And this is an area of our research that the naysayers really don't want to contend with. When we began our research, with one exception, it was claimed that all victims of spontaneous human combustion had to die. These had to be fatal fires. How else? You've got a body that's ashen. Nobody could survive this. What we have discovered in our research, if you want to accept our research, is that there's a subset of the phenomenon of spontaneous human combustion in which people survive partial self-immolation. They live to tell the incredible tale. The burn injuries can be anything from a first-degree burn, reddening of the skin, to a fourth-degree burn in which there is deep muscle damage. They survive the fire, the energy, whatever it is that produces the burn, self-extinguishes, and they live to talk about it. There have also been witness cases to this phenomenon. There are bystanders who will see this happening to others. What they most often report seeing is a bright electric blue colored flame or light, like you would see at the tip of a lit acetylene torch, that engulfs the body, usually from the midsection radiating outwards.
Now, you talk about your book, Ablaze, The Mystery of Fires, yes?
Yes.
Can you tell us, please, is it about your research, or is it just about accounts of cases?
Well, it's about both, because the cases are largely the result of the research that we have done.
Okay.
That research involves traveling around the world since the early 70s, meeting with, speaking with, interviewing fire professionals who have had the unnerving opportunity to witness some of these cases firsthand. It involves doing archival research, going to medical libraries and pulling out cart after cart after cart after cart of obscure medical journals and textbooks from 100, 200 years ago, going through pages and indexes looking for cases that have been lost to history. We have found them. Many of the cases that we document in our book have been lost to history. They're not available anywhere else except within the pages of Ablaze, or people have purloined or plagiarized them since the book was published in 1995.
Yeah. So, and whereabouts can you get your book?
The easiest way to obtain the book at this time is to go to Amazon.com, go down, look for Ablaze by Larry Arnold, and you'll see it pop up. You'll see some very fine reviews. You'll see some very scurrilous reviews of the book. Once again, this is a highly controversial subject that invokes highly controversial opinions. We're bemused by some of the postings on the Amazon.com website about Ablaze, because they indicate to us that clearly people posting some of the reviews have not bothered to read the book, or don't understand clearly what they've read in the book. We will guarantee to your listeners that if they have not read Ablaze or large excerpts from it posted who knows where, they will learn things they did not know about the human body. They will learn things they do not know about human combustibility within the pages of Ablaze, or you get your money back. We don't know any author who can make such a claim about a nonfiction book.
Yeah, I'll have to get a copy of that. So that would be interesting to read. Now, Mark, John, is there anything else you'd like to ask Larry?
Just if Larry is with possible fireballs and have an effect on the human body in the form of what is it?
You mean energy burst?
Ball lightning. Could ball lightning have any effect, a similar type microwave effect, striking a person?
In our view, the answer is absolutely yes. We have cases in the book that are attributable to ball lightning, plasmoids, things of that nature. We can say that because the person burned happened to be witnessing the fireball come through a window or out of the sky and strike his or her body, or it's been witnessed to occur by others. If they had not been looking at the right place at the right time, they would never have seen the ball lightning or the plasmoid coming out of the air and striking the body, so they would have been burned spontaneously and not know why. Some of these cases we posit can be best explained by external sources, but not known to science or not identified by witnesses. Other cases we posit can be best explained by something that truly happens internal to the body, and the burns are from the inside out. We actually had that in one of the survivor cases where the attending physicians diagnosed the burn injuries of Jack Angel, the survivor, as quote-unquote internal in origin. And by definition, that speaks to us of nothing but spontaneous human combustion.
Larry, there's another case which I found fascinating. It's It's from London in 1967. I don't know whether you know this one, the Robert Francis Bailey case.
Know it very well.
Yeah, and I think that's quite telling, because fire professionals actually saw this guy ablaze. And, you're saying about the solar plexus, and there's flames, blue flames, actually being issued by force out of a 4-inch slit in his abdomen.
Precisely.
It was an amazing sort of case. So if anybody wants to check that one out, I think it's well worth a Google. Yeah.
Thank you. The Bailey case is mentioned in Ablaze. And when we heard about the case, we contacted Jack Stacy, who is the brigade commander for the department that responded to that fire call. Mm-hmm. Jack happened to be soon afterwards vacationing in Daytona Beach down in Florida. He agreed, and we booked flight to fly from Pennsylvania down to Florida, sat down with Jack Stacy, and had him regale us with the details of that amazing fire scene that he and his men witnessed. They witnessed fire or a flame-like energy emanating from the abdomen of Robert Bailey, already deceased by the time he and his crew arrived. He told us that they emptied the contents of several fire extinguishers into Bailey's gut to put out the quote-unquote fire. And his professional expertise as a professional firefighter, the best way to explain the demise of Robert Bailey was by spontaneous human combustion. We could have sat in an armchair and made guesses about that fire scene. We chose not to do that, unlike many of our detractors. We invested money and time to meet with Jack Stacy and get his firsthand observations and experience about that fire scene. We have done that repeatedly for dozens and dozens of cases that we document in Ablaze, and indeed cases that have happened since the publication of Ablaze in 1995. That's how we conduct our research. That's how any good investigator should conduct research.
Absolutely. I'm with you fully on that one.
Larry, where do you hope your research for this will lead?
We say partially tongue-in-cheek that we would hope it leads to a Nobel Prize in physics and or in medicine. I think our research actually warrants that. That said, we really like to see mainstream fire science and mainstream medicine embrace the research that we have done, take the subject seriously for a change, and try to understand the nature of the energies and the forces that produce, on rare occasion, these absolutely horrific, macabre, and yet incredibly fascinating internalized burns to a small number of the human population. And as we said earlier, not just to humans, but to animals and to property as well.
Definitely. Now, your website is parascience.com. Yeah.
Correct.
Parascience International. Is it just dealing with SHC, or are there other things you're delving into?
We have a broad interest in Forteana generally. We've chosen, obviously, based on this interview, you can conclude to focus on fire phenomena specifically. Mm-hmm. We also have a strong interest in one specific aspect of cryptozoology, that being large-winged birds, so-called thunderbird sightings. We have a number of them here in our home state of Pennsylvania. Mm-hmm. And if any of your listeners have further information to send to us about anomalous fires or anomalous large-winged creatures, please contact us through the website, and we'll be delighted to exchange information and ideas with you.
That's great. Well, Larry, it's been great having you on the show and for sharing your research with us and your opinions. Thank you for taking the time to talk to us on this Sunday. Please enjoy the rest of the day.
You both have been very kind to us this afternoon. We have enjoyed immensely this opportunity, and best wishes to you both.
Thank you very much. Hopefully we'll have you on again sometime in the future.
Wonderful.
Thank you very much, Larry. Bye-bye.
You're most welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Ciao.
Bye, Larry.
Well, there you go, guys. What a night. It's been quite electric. Really?
It has been good.
It's been a flaming good conversation.
Really enjoyed that one. They keep winding us up with Jingle Hauler.
Oh, I know. But I must admit, though, this spontaneous human combustion has always fathomed me, and I think I will get the book just to have a look, because it's going to have cases in it as well.
Yeah, I mean, it when you realise what sort of temperatures are needed and how long it actually takes.
You really blew my mind when you said that. You know, what was it? 1 hour per 45 kilogram.
Yeah, which is £100.
£100 of body weight.
So it would basically take
870 to 980 Celsius.
It would take somewhere close to 2 hours to actually cremate me.
Really?
Yeah.
And yet that was done in 6 minutes.
Yeah.
That's, oh my God, that's just unbelievable. Well, as Larry said, Ablaze, the mysterious fires of spontaneous human combustion, is available on Amazon. I did put the link on there. There's a hardcover. It says you can get it for $18.44. So hopefully you can get it in the US. I mean, in the United Kingdom as well.
I'm pretty sure it'll be on Amazon somewhere.
It's got to be, isn't it? So, you know, we should be able to get it on Amazon. Oh, I know, it is on amazon.co.uk. That's better. Let me see. Where are we? Does it tell me how much it is? Let's have a look. Bloody hell. New from $23.97. I think I'd rather buy it from America. So that can't be right, surely.
Then we get the what's it on there? The P&P and everything else.
So.
But how many dollars was it?
18 point something.
18 point something.
Yeah. Right, what we got here? Let's see what you've been saying. Forgot to tell you, I had a dog that died of SHC wolf and it was gone. Ha ha ha, John. Someone let him in the back entrance. I beg your pardon. In the kitchen area.
Yeah, a friend of theirs delivered the fridge freezer.
Oh right, I see, fridge freezer. So they've been talking about stuff like that. Mind you, I think I was glad to see that Dave and Liz and Ed come back on this week. Yes. Very surprised to see you, but it was really good. Yes. Don't start on Chingle. Don't you be winding me up.
Apparently, Ed wasn't happy last week because he kept getting his name and apparently it turns out he looks like him.
Oh right, okay. So you're going to wind me up and keep saying Chingle Hall.
Catholic priest.
Well, don't forget, guys, that's basically it for tonight. We'll be back next week, and as I say, please join us. You may be few, but at the end of the day, you are what we need, and you are welcome. So join us next week, and we'll see you then. Thank you, and all that's left to say is keep the paranormal friendly. Good night,
guys.
Hello, Harry Price here. Good evening. If there's nothing myself and everybody else enjoy here on the other side more is the sit back and relax and listen to Parasearch Radio with its paranormal news, views and reviews from across the UK and beyond. Make sure to find out more about them on Facebook, Twitter and the World Wide Web, whatever they are, to keep up to date with all their broadcasts throughout the week. And I hope you enjoy them as much as we do over here. Hello? Is anybody there?